I want to tell you about a moment that changed the way that I do this work. There I was sitting across from a family, a dietitian in his sophomore year. My new clients were an immigrant family, Spanish speaking, recently arrived, and they were navigating a system that honestly wasn't quite built for them. And in that first session, I was doing what I was trained to do. And I noticed that it was a family heading down the road of sharing the same chronic disease, which is crazy to think about. I was over here talking about nutrient density, superfoods, and the latest nutrition trends, and how this stacked up to the latest research on what their body actually needs. And as I kept talking with them, I paused and really looked at them. That was the moment that I knew they didn't need education on superfoods. They needed assurance that their next meal was actually coming. Because with their access to funds and their access to nutrient dense grocery stores within walking distance, this was a disaster waiting to happen. And I honestly remember leaving that appointment, going straight to the food bank. And by the end of the week, I had started a food pantry. Each person who came in for a nutrition session got a bag of food, recipes, education, and in a language they could actually use. That's when I understood what this work is actually for. At the Table is a production of the Dairy Fuels Network, an Arizona-based multimedia platform dedicated to the people, stories, and science that live at the intersection of food, culture, and community. This series is produced in partnership with the Dairy Council of Arizona, made possible by Arizona dairy farmers who believe that real food conversations start with real relationships. I'm your host, Desi Abeda, registered dietitian, and this is At the Table. I'm like 15 years in the game and 10 years as a dietitian. And when I say in the game, I started in eating disorder treatment. And in this world, it's mostly and almost entirely white, very affluent, and focused on a very specific kind of relationship with food. Because if you've ever worked with eating disorders or understand anything about the demographic, it really has a lot more to do with people's relationship to food and oftentimes some pairing of trauma or other things from a mental health perspective. And so in my first couple of years, this is where I honed in on my skill of motivational interviewing and honed in on my skill of habit formation. And while I've been and continue to consult in this same field over the past 15 years, when I was in my sophomore year, I actually transferred into community nutrition, not knowing exactly how this would go. Because to me, the crazy thing about it was instead of talking about how the food looks or its nutrient density, the conversation switched from that to whether food actually exists in these communities, and especially in my community of Tucson, Arizona. But if I'm looking at it over the past, let's say 3.5 years, I've had a lot of success with building out an infrastructure where we created systems to elevate the diverse voices in the health and wellness space, dietitians, wellness entrepreneurs, and people doing real work. And I was able to do this with one of the world's biggest brands. And when I decided to go back into my business after some layoffs at the job that I was at, it really forced me to get back not only into my business, but into my creativity with how to solve my community's problems. Because when I was thinking about it, why is this happening in my own backyard? Why is this happening in my community? And if I'm being honest, I can't be one of those people that just sits back and just observes. Because I've spent most of my career sitting across from people and asking them about their food, what they eat, why they eat it, and what food actually means to them. And you know what? The answer is generally never about nutrients. It's about memory. I mean, think back on one of your favorite foods. It's likely tied to an experience that you've shared with a loved one or an experience that you can't not forget. We get reminded of that every holiday season. Because when it's about memory, it starts to become about family. It's about what's available. And it's also about who you share that meal with. Now, as I was stepping back into the social media space, I started to see something that, if we're being real, started to really bother me. In this day of social media, I actually want to shout out a lot of brands and teams that are leveraging diverse voices in the dietitian space, in the health and wellness space. But honestly, with a lot of the leadership decisions that have happened that have had an impact on food security in a lot of our communities, I got real tired of watching colleagues post about food insecurity. Honestly, really moving stuff. I mean, posting analytics, and really understanding what is happening and educating their online communities, only to see them like 2 hours later announce a brand partnership where nobody asked that brand to do a single thing for their actual community that everyone was up in arms about. And if I'm being honest, I wanted to fix that. I didn't want to post about it. I actually wanted to leverage an opportunity to get a team around me, because if I'm thinking back on how cool Arizona is, it's not just one thing. It's a full ecosystem where if you start in the south, it's going to be mostly desert surrounded by mountains. And as you go north and head into Flagstaff, you're going to see pine trees and different types of mountains and an elevation gain. And you can find yourself within a bunch of different ecosystems. And it's honestly no different when we look at the people here. There's a ton of diversity here. And if we look at the health and wellness experts, your dietitians, your doctors, your wellness entrepreneurs, these are all people that are doing really extraordinary things that don't necessarily have a larger platform and who aren't really being heard outside of their zip code. That's what At the Table is about, is celebrating those stories and celebrating the people who are doing the real work. Because honestly, a lot of the colleagues that I talked about earlier are friends of mine. They're really good friends, they're acquaintances, but I honestly want to challenge us as a collective. You got to either be about that work or don't. So we're in year one of the Dairy Fuels Network. And honestly, what has been really cool is we're thinking about this as a pilot where we're taking a lot of learnings. We're going out, we're being able to tell the stories of the people on the ground, our communities, and some of the really cool things that we're doing. And while I didn't honestly expect a lot of perfection when it comes to this, I feel like the people that we chose to be a part of this network are pretty damn near perfect. Now, the conversations aren't always going to be perfect. The post, the type of impact that we're going to have, but we're going to take learnings from it. And honestly, in this mini series, you're probably going to see some of the same thing. It's going to be a raw look into their stories, into some of the things that they believe in, and some of the work that they're doing. The production is likely going to improve from series 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and then maybe even beyond. But one thing that won't change is who is at the table, who we're celebrating, and what we're building. Because there's going to be 2 through lines that we're going to be celebrating. Our first one's going to be every guest that was chosen because they give a damn. They care about their work. They care about their communities. And you know what? Not all of them are going to have a massive following, but they are going to have a massive impact in their community. And the second, we're going to celebrate dairy. Dairy is one of those nutrients that is a beautiful complement. I mean, think of cottage cheese these days. Cottage cheese is that girl right now. We're adding it to everything. Cheese in general is something that you sprinkle on top, maybe even that side of milk. I always think back, and it was honestly part of our first initial meeting with some of the wonderful people at the Arizona Dairy Council. I talked about how being one of 5 in my family, we used to just sit down. I'm the oldest of 5 kids. We used to just sit down, have our meal, and then pass around a gallon of milk just because it was a compliment to the experience. So when I thought about not only just the role of dairy in my life, but also the role of dairy from a nutrient perspective in our communities, it's kind of that perfect buddy that you invite over to a meal. Now, as a listener, you're probably going to hear me talk to you all or refer to you all as our community or our listeners or our viewership. I want you to grow with us. This isn't going to be a finished product. This is honestly the beginning. And if we're being real, if you've ever been a part of something from the start, you know that that's actually the best seat in the house. Not when it does really well, but to see those types of people grow. I mean, who the heck out there doesn't want to see someone that they know or someone that they really appreciate not be successful? So let's go ahead and meet who's at the table. We have a community food leader, owner and founder of the Tucson Family Food Project, in Stephen Cota Robles. I met this dude like a year ago, and I will tell you the fantastic things that he is doing in the community just have to be a part of the story. Our second person is actually a dear friend and honestly really good mentor of mine, in Christy Wilson. She's been in the game for quite some time and is a fantastic community dietitian that has worked through a ton of the different life cycles, from our college students to now a lot of our elderly community in my city, Tucson, Arizona. We have Courtney Bliss, the founder of Feeding Bliss. She's out of Phoenix. And honestly, I met her through social media, and the way that she shows up is such a genuine look into what it's like to both pour into your community and then also pour into your family. And then lastly, for all you science nerds, we have Dr. Chris Safeli, who is the Senior Vice President of Nutrition Research at National Dairy Council. I got to tell you, the word excited is undermining how it truly feels to get a well-rounded approach of stories that I think a lot of you will benefit from. So before we get into all of our episodes, I want to discuss real quick what At the Table is not. I wouldn't consider this a wellness podcast, and I promise you I will stay clear of it being just a nutrition lecture. I would say it's a show celebrating dairy as a complement and how it shows up in a lot of our lives, but it's not all just about dairy. It's a show about people who understand how food is about culture, that access to nutrient-dense food is justice work, and that the communities most impacted by the food system are also the ones most rarely asked to sit at the table and lead the conversation. And we're changing that, one episode at a time. This is year one. I'm Desi. This is At the Table, and welcome to the Dairy Fuels Network. I'm super glad you're at the table with us.